Kazum. I liked watching your video, and I had some ideas about some of what you asked and shared, and just wanted to throw some ideas past you and see if they resonate with you in some sort of a way. So the video that I'm talking about is the one regarding emotions. And you used as an example Tom Cruise jumping up and down on the couch. So you mentioned something about how it seems that in particularly our society, that if people have any emotion, the only one that they're kind of allowed to have, if anything, is sort of like ranty anger, at least here on YouTube. Um, and yeah, I've noticed that too. But just culturally, even just looking at the difference between what's considered to be acceptable for women to express and what's considered common for men to express, um, those are pretty clearly defined in some sort of strangulated way, and that anybody who doesn't abide by that is kind of, certain people will be taken aback by. I remember when I studied sociology and anthropology, two of the things that I thought were interesting, but I think I learned this in my multicultural education class. Maybe that wasn't in one of those. It had to do with the different types of cultures as far as the way they treat people and the way they treat items and the way they treat time. And the way that it described it was, if time is considered sort of, I don't know, like spherical, or whether time is considered linear. If you have a spherical view of time, then time can't be wasted and time can't be spent, or there's not a time ahead of you or a time behind of you. It's always now. So obviously Americans fall into the linear, but cultures that are known particularly for spherical time would be like Australian Aborigines, for instance, is one of the big expressions of that. The other thing that it talked about had to do with the way that people are treated. So considering the group over the individual, or vice versa, which is considered more important. And there's kind of an overlap that I draw, but they didn't teach this in class, but I think of it, has to do with that manners are the only overlap of that. In other words, an individual will, out of courtesy to another, take something upon themselves which is maybe not necessarily comfortable to make other people more comfortable. Other than that, it's either the extreme of one way or another, as far as the group being more important than the individual or not. Well, here in America, where everybody is like this rogue cowboy, individualism is so upheld as important, as opposed to, and I'm not saying this because it's like a slam or anything, because I used to live in Japan. I lived in Japan for about 5 years. They're very well known for their group mentality, as opposed, and that is of greater importance than an individual. And the same thing goes for objects. Like, for instance, I had a Japanese staying with me in the house, and they were in a room that I used for my office. And I was needing to take care of some office business, and I had told him, I'm going to need to use the room from this period of time till then. And he thought of rooms as utilitarian, and so he didn't feel put out of the room for the 3 hours that I needed it, and he very easily collected all his things and had set them off to the side so that I could really easily take care of what I needed to do. Whereas I know a lot of Americans would have been like, oh, but I unpacked all my stuff, and um, just the way that he looked at the space, it was collectively to be used, not to be, I don't know, uh, thought of as his own, even though he's a guest, but still, that's just a sort of a small example. Well, this expanded in the definition to cultures and families, obviously, okay, because I said cultures, but there are families which tend to be more quiet, um, and you'll know those families even maybe like when you mentioned that friend of yours, but there are more gregarious ones. And you mentioned being a musician, and maybe that's one of the reasons why I think I can understand a lot what you say, because I'm a musician. Both of my parents are musicians, and music goes back 3 and 4 generations in my family. And so I understand, you know, the way of expression and feeling excited about something, um, and how that can become to a person who's not raised around that very uncomfortable. And I think it goes further than introvert, extrovert, ambivert. Uh, I think that it has to do with believability. And here's something that I'm just going to throw into the mix. Um, I've read that one of the ways that people decide if someone is telling the truth or lying has to do with the details and the emphasis that they put when they talk about certain things. So if someone has a lot of details, people will consider them probably to be lying, because it's believed that nobody would be putting in so many details if they weren't trying to bolster what they were saying. And the emphasis being on one thing or another, having to do with trying to shape what the other person thinks rather than letting them come to their own conclusion. One being more forceful if you're possibly lying. And I think I can attest for part of this, and this I learned from teaching yoga, is I don't think that people really actually care whether you're expressing one emotion more than the other, but it's the energy behind it, the force of that energy that freaks people out. So it's kind of like they don't care whether you're laughing and smiling or if you're really, really upset, because just the force of that energy is so overwhelming that they're like, too much, gotta get out. And I've seen that, and it's really interesting because it's like people want to get out of the way of something. So I don't know if any of these connect some points, or um, just I wonder what your opinions of what I thought you said. But as far as Tom Cruise jumping, it, I wished I could have been happy for it, but I did find it very strange, only because to me it didn't feel authentic. Um, and the reason I say that is I think that was really more why people were so weirded out by it, because I think that in some sort of a way that either he was lying to himself or it was part of a character that he was wanting to, a part of his own character, that he really wants you to see that about him. That's what he really wants you to know about him. And it's kind of like, if something is true about you, you really don't need to broadcast it. People will come to that conclusion, right? And because of it not coming from a place of exuberance, to me, that's why it was like, look, we don't want you to be lying. Please stop lying to us. More than it was having to do with whether he really felt like he was in love or not. And I'm not saying this in response to the fact of, his divorce, because I don't think that that's um, responsive of any of that. Because, you can be in and then fall out of love or whatever. People get together and leave each other all the time. So, well, I hope some of that was cohesive, and I'd be really interested in your opinion back. And bread blessings of peace.